So, hey everyone, my name is Victoria Thompson. As always, so excited to be here with y'all to be talking about a multitude of things within STEM. This piece of the STEM and literacy component is very near and dear to my heart because I think literacy is everybody's responsibility. And hopefully, I can share some tips, tricks, and tools with y'all today. That way, you can implement them in your classrooms, schools, organizations, or wherever you happen to be. So, what I'm going to do is go ahead and share my screen. I am usually coming in from my Disney Parks themed home office, but right now I'm coming in from Cannon Beach, Oregon. And here's a little bit of information about me. Give me just 1 second, that way everything else can come up. All right, so you are here today for STEM and literacy with Microsoft, and we're going to specifically be focusing on reading progress today. So if you are interested in reading progress for your students or the reading progress platform that we have, you are in the right place. And even if you don't even know what I'm talking about, you are still in the right place because I think that you're going to gain a lot from this conversation. So again, my name is Victoria Thompson. I am on Twitter at Victoria the Tech, which is where you can find me. And I share a lot of various things about STEM literacy and just technology and how it can help to elevate learning. And then that is my email address right there. It is vithompson@microsoft.com. I'm very friendly, so of course, feel free to reach out. Don't be a stranger. Let me know how I can help you or if there's anything I can do to help you alongside that process. A little bit of background about me. So I got my first job post-college, right? I was teaching in South Carolina. So I was teaching 5th and 6th grade math and science there in a variety of different areas, but primarily what I focused on in the last year was I had really wanted for a kind of dual class of math and science. The school that I was working at, 5th grade began at middle school, and that was very challenging for students where you go from having 1 or 2 teachers to having like 6, right? Because we have science, math, social studies, and ELA, and then you have your 2 specials teachers. I had pushed for a long time to have just like a 2-teacher team that was science and math, and then ELA and social studies. And the last year, they were like, okay, this makes sense. Let's go ahead and do it. And the best thing about working on that team alongside my awesome co-teacher was we really got to intertwine that STEM and literacy and work together on a very granular level so that way students could see how literacy impacted all grades. Then we picked up and we moved to Washington because of my spouse's job. And I did a couple different things before I transitioned to the Microsoft role. But one of my most favorite things, honestly, was being a STEM coach. And that was where I came from before I joined Microsoft. And I drove STEM integration and digital transformation in schools in Washington State and just working with other instructional coaches to see what we can do to enhance those roles here. And now I'm at Microsoft doing it for 23 states. So lots of fun, very cool things. And let's talk a little bit about the why behind this, because I know my why. And I think whenever I speak with educators and school leaders and organizations and schools, I'm wondering why exactly is literacy important? Because I know personally, but I also know that literacy is important and also personal to every single person. So this is the question that I like to ask, just what's the why? Why do we care about literacy? Why is it important for our students to be literate? Why is it important for us, regardless of what we teach and what we do, to be involved with literacy initiatives? And I feel like if we're all in this webinar right now, we're on some semblance of understanding the importance of literacy on a day-to-day or even year-to-year level. What I'm thinking about is once students leave the classroom and they're ready for college and career, what that looks like. The other thing that I think about is that literacy is often parceled out as just, how are you reading, right? How are you reading? Are you literate? Can you deduce different types of paragraphs? Can you make low-level inferences? Which I think is also good and quite honestly fair. But literacy extends beyond, can you read? Literacy is, quite frankly, can you communicate? Can you collaborate? Do you know what's in front of you? Do you understand what's in front of you? And also, can you work with others around you to get to a solution? And I feel like if we look at various standards across the United States for literacy, that's why there are things like listening standards, speaking standards, communication standards. You know, we look at things like soft skills for students. That's all part of literacy. And it might not look like picking up a book or listening to an audiobook or reading an article, but it's still literacy at its core component. So speaking of that literacy, here's what I did. What I'm going to flip to next is I compiled data from 3 different states. And the 3 states that I compiled were Washington State, which is where I currently live. It might not be where I'm sitting right now, but it is where I currently live. South Carolina, which is where I used to teach for the most part. And then Florida, which is where I'm about to move. So I'm still going to, of course, be continuing with Special Ed Tech Center. I do a lot of work at Microsoft out in the Southeast, and doing the 6-hour flights back and forth was just getting to be a lot. So we decided it's time to move. We're still going to maintain our relationship, but time to just move a little bit closer to where work is. So here's what we do know. If I kind of take a look at what the statistics are for adults in the United States, 4 in 5 adults. So right now I'm just looking specifically at US all up. 79%, which again, I know it's not a clean 4 and 5. 4 and 5% is 80%. It is 79, but for statistics, they do round up to 4 and 5. So 4 and 5 adults do have English literacy skills that are sufficient to complete tasks that require comparing and contrasting information, paraphrasing, or making those low-level inferences. What does this mean? For example, let's say that I've got like a map right here. I can read the map. What that also means is that if there's a stop sign, I can see the stop sign. What that means, if I've got like a regular book, I might be able to point out who the characters are in the book. So those basic baseline literacy skills, 4 and 5 adults in the United States have that. And while I think that that's cool and all fine and dandy, what I'd like for us to reflect on, quite frankly, is that in the United States, we really do not parcel literacy and English literacy skills out in sufficiency, do we? We don't. The 2 words that get thrown around the most, quite frankly, are mastery, which I think we're all familiar with, and proficiency. So these are the 2 words that are often thrown around when it comes to literacy and just standards and skills, period, in the United States. I remember in South Carolina, the way that we did it was not MET, which was the lowest caliber, MET, which means that you are meeting standards, and MET for science and math when I was there was at about 50%. So think about it. If you were teaching a class, 50% would not be MET. 50% would probably be a failing grade, but 50% was MET for the state testing. And then anywhere between, I want to say like 60 to 65%, maybe 70%. It's been a while, but that was proficient at that point. So meeting those standards and those competencies, that's what that meant there. And when I still also think about the English literacy skills for the sufficiency, sufficient means you can just do enough to get by. And what we want our students to do is honestly thrive, right? We want them to be in a position where they're thriving with literacy. They can't do that if they're just doing the bare minimum. We'll get to what we can do to enhance that in just a few moments, but for right now, we're just going to stick to the facts. So I looked at the overall statistics for the United States, and then I was thinking, state to state, everywhere that I've worked and everywhere that I'm going to go, what's going on here? So then I looked at Washington State, and across Washington State, it is estimated that 35% of students, right? So just a little bit more than 1/3, right? Like 1/3 is 33. Right now we're at 35. 35% of students are reading proficiently via the NAEP statistics. That's a national organization that kind of pulls statistics statewide, nationwide, every single year. They actually just released a pretty significant report about like post-COVID statistics in the United States. So if you're interested, I definitely advise that y'all go ahead and look that up. I chose this data from 2019 because that was the last quote unquote year that we've all kind of been together in the same way via COVID. So it is estimated 35% of students are reading proficiently. That's not necessarily like the worst thing to ever happen, but it's also kind of jarring that 35% of students are reading proficiently. What does that mean for the other students? Because proficient, excuse me, proficient doesn't just mean that I can look at the map. Proficient means that I can navigate around the map. Proficient means that I can compare and contrast on a deeper level. Proficient means that I can do character analysis. Proficient means that I can public speak and not be afraid. Proficient means so many different things than sufficient. Sufficient is just enough. Proficient means above and beyond to a degree. When I think about Florida, where I'm moving, across the state of Florida, 30% of students are reading proficiently. And again, that's about a third. It could be worse, but it also could be a lot better. And then I think of South Carolina, right? 33% of South Carolina fourth graders are reading proficiently. And I pulled that statistic specifically for South Carolina, not just because I used to teach and work there, but if you are on this webinar, you might know that third and fourth grade, those are huge years for students when it comes to reading proficiency. In early childhood education, students might typically get held back during the kindergarten or first grade year. During elementary education, third grade or fourth grade is a retention year. In middle school, it's usually going to be fifth or sixth grade, right, as a retention year. And then in high school, it's all credit based. So students can kind of ebb and flow throughout classes dependent on what they want to take and also what they want to do. The reason why I say this is because third and fourth grade for reading in particular gets a lot of attention because typically for early childhood, or like pre-K through 2, there's not a ton of testing going on. But third, fourth grade is where the testing begins to ramp up, especially with reading. So just speaking on my experience teaching in South Carolina, 33% of South Carolina fourth graders are reading proficiently, which again is not the worst possible thing in the world, but we could also be doing a lot better. Because what does it mean? It means that that 67% are not reading proficiently at that moment. What I'm trying to say is that we have a huge literacy challenge in the United States, which is not necessarily news, but it just seems to be getting a little bit more challenging to mitigate. The pandemic did a number on us as educators. The pandemic also did a number on our students and our families. And then also social media outlets like YouTube and TikTok are also shortening just kind of what our students' expectations might be when it comes to consuming various media. Because literacy is still listening to things, right? Like right now, y'all are being literate by listening and consuming this. But if I'm maybe only consuming like 30 to 60 to 90-minute videos, it just parcels out the way that I view literacy a little bit differently. So these are all challenges that we as educators have needed to navigate. And when I think about how we navigate it, literacy really is the root of understanding. If we're literate, then we can understand. If we're not literate, then we're not understanding. So how do we understand? We understand by communicating. We understand by making sure that we're able to connect with each other, communicate with each other, collaborate with each other, and really be able to do things not only in the classroom, but also beyond. So even though these statistics look a little scary, quite frankly, whenever I see them, I'm hopeful because what I look at, or really, let me back up. What I see when I look at this is I see potential. I don't see a dire state that is going to be continuously going on, right? Even though we might be in a crisis means there's an option. And the option means that we need to do things to make sure that we can try at least, right? Get to where we need to be to get students where they want to be. And to me, that's potential. So what is that potential, you might ask? I'm thinking, how can we best provide literacy support for our students? I'm thinking back on my experience when I taught in the classroom and also when I student taught, because I student taught in third grade, which I mentioned is a bit of a retention year, but it's also an opportunity for students to kind of like have that testing, meet with parents, talk about various things. I feel like I came in completely unaware of various supports that could have been offered. And as a student teacher and as a teacher, period, you are just strapped for time. There's not a lot of insight, quite frankly, as to maybe what programs, platforms, and things that you could be utilizing. But then I also think long-term as to what are the solutions that I could have used in order to make sure that my students get this every single year. I didn't have that support. I also taught STEM, right? I taught science and mathematics, where I was very intentionally putting literacy into what I was doing. But also I did get opposition from people that I worked with who were very well-meaning, but didn't understand the connection between literacy and STEM and how that might work. So the literacy support for our students, I think, needs to span across subjects. It doesn't matter what you teach, who you teach, where you are, that literacy, literacy support is crucial. So this is where I think Reading Progress is a hero, especially when it comes to STEM. And Reading Progress is a great tool regardless, again, of what you teach, but you'll notice that I very specifically got a screen grab here of landforms and oceans. And the reason why is because it can work wonders when it comes to STEM. I'm going to walk through what Reading Progress is in just a moment, but I want to point out that what you see here, quite frankly, revolutionary. What students are doing is they're reading aloud various passages. What the artificial intelligence or the computer does is it tracks the correct words per minute for read alouds. It also tracks the accuracy rate of what the student is saying out loud. It tracks the mispronunciations, the omissions, the self-corrections, the insertions, and the repetitions. And what we can also do is edit the text, look for different pronunciation sensitivity for students that might be English language learners. And on top of that, it gives actionable feedback back to the kid. All those times that we're doing running records in the back of the classroom, right, where we're like taking up like arbitrary texts, giving them to kids, asking for them to read, and then we have to manually do it, those days are over. Oh, and I cannot tell you how many moments I spent having to do those running records, and particularly did not care for them because I was like, I could be doing all these other things with the kids, but it is kind of a mandate, right? As educators, we need to figure out where our kids are with their learning. Reading Progress makes it personal. It makes it intimate in a way where kids don't feel singled out. You know, I'm not calling 5 kids to the back of the room to read out loud. And I still remember when I was in middle school where we were kind of parceled out into various groups for reading levels. The high level kids, and I was in that group, right? We're reading Roll of Thunder, Hear My Cry. Whereas the lower level group, and again, all in quotation marks, they were reading things from the textbook, the science textbook that the school gave us. I don't know how that's equitable, and I don't care to know how because I know it's not. It's not equitable to have various kids be kind of put on the spot where one kid's reading a novel and one kid's given a textbook and saying, read this, this is your running record. So what I appreciate about Reading Progress is it gives kids the moments to not only be themselves, but also work at their own pace. So speaking of, what does Reading Progress have to offer on top of what I already said? So with Reading Progress all up on top of the Reading Progress that we give our kids, this is actionable literacy feedback for students on a variety of topics. I went over quite a few, but the 3 that really stand out to me, fluency, pronunciation, prosody, just ways that way we can make sure that students, again, are those communicators. Not only can they receive it, but they can also give it back to us. That's very important. There's also video feedback for students from educators. The reason why I want to point this out is because if you've got a student that struggles with reading, like if you give them written feedback and they're also reading a text and they might not understand it, written feedback might not be the best way to give feedback to a kid. Just being real. If they struggle with the reading, then they might not be able to understand or even comprehend the written feedback that you give them. So what you can actually do is give video and audio feedback to kids. And I love this personally, because even though I love writing, it does take a while for me. Whereas if I were to turn on a camera and I'm like, hey, Molly, right? I'm just coming up with a name. I really enjoyed the presentation that you just gave. You might want to slow down a little bit on slides 3, 4, and 5, and then also put a little bit more emphasis on your landforms and oceans scripture. That's it, right? That video feedback not only saves me time as an educator, but also gives them the feedback that they need to implement. Because again, if they struggle with the written feedback or the written text, then they might struggle with the feedback that you give them later on. We also have these actionable insights to help students improve those literacy skills. So I love the fact that students can do it all within their own mind frame. And I love that because, again, it's that gradual release of responsibility. We are moving from teacher, teacher, teacher gradually to, hey, now students can do this. I think every educator wants that to a certain degree. So let's make it happen for our students. And then I've spoken before in other webinars I've given, just I love the immersive reader integration. It is phenomenal and just gives a way for students to be able to interact with the text in ways that they might not have been able to do before. So you might be wondering, what is reading progress? How do I get started? All the things. So this is within Microsoft Teams. If you are not acclimated to Teams, please let me know so we can go ahead and get you started. And what I'm going to do is just kind of walk you through creating a reading progress assignment. I'm also going to demo, but I like having both, honestly, the text and the demo. I'm a text person. I'm also a demo person to a degree, but I like going back through and maybe like taking screenshots or watching the recording. So I want to make sure that y'all have both. So what you're going to do to create a reading progress assignment is what you're going to do is in Teams, you're going to go to your class, and what you're going to do is select assignments. And again, I'm going to walk you through all this in a visual. When you create the assignment and you make the title for the assignment, similar to how you do in any other learning management system, it's not like you just kind of create the assignment blank and call it a day. Got to create it, you got to label it. But what you can do is you can attach something and then you can select reading progress from the drop-down menu. So you can attach a PDF, a Word document, use your own files, you can use Teams files, you can use other files. And we also have passages in a sample library from ReadWorks. If y'all don't know ReadWorks, highly recommend you check it out. Lots of neat stuff there. And if you want to upload a passage from there, we've got that integration. So that is really cool. What you're going to do is select the passage for those students, upload it or select it, and then from there, you can get started. So the same way that you might want to go ahead and select a passage and upload it for your students, you can do it within Reading Progress and really get the process started with this. So this is where you begin. Now you might be thinking, what else can I do within Reading Progress? And here's what you can do. There's a lot of things here, and I'm not going to go over all of them right now because I'm going to demo, but you can select reading level, genre, how many attempts you want for the student to have. If you want them to read aloud or do things aloud, you can maybe only have it set to 2 to 3. I will typically do anywhere between 4 to 5. Only because I've primarily worked with younger students. They do like to practice. They want to make sure that they're getting it right. However, if you're doing maybe like a timed like assessment or test, or maybe a running record, you can absolutely adjust that. We also have pronunciation sensitivity. We are very sensitive, irony, to the fact that not everyone might have, right, that basic baseline like English recognition. We have students that are coming in with various languages, various cultures, and also various perspectives. So you can choose and specify how strict you want that auto detect to be when listening and estimating errors. On top of that too, there are some students that might not want video on, and that's okay. You can kind of select back and forth, and then you can edit. You can do a lot of different things. Reading Coach is going to be the next webinar that I do. So I'm going to hold on to that. But all these things that are here but wait, there's more. You can absolutely check out within Reading Progress. There's a lot of really cool stuff here. And speaking of, I can show you better than I can tell you. So I just kind of went over a basic baseline. Before I get to the demo, you might be wondering, what might this have to do with STEM? And the reason why is because if we've got word challenges, lab reports, pieces of text that we want for our students to do, we can't just rely on the ELA, the social studies, the humanities, the whatever educators to do it. We also have to be active participators and practitioners in that space. And that means that we need to be literacy forward. I'm going to stop sharing. And what I'm going to do, just give me one moment. I am heading to my reading progress. All right, you're going to see me there in 3. You're going to see me there in 2. And 1. All right, here we go. So this is my teacher teams, is what I like to call it. I love my teacher teams. It's very different from my personal teams. But the reason why is because you can see that it does look a little different than if you're meeting with a colleague. So within this Microsoft Teams, what I'm doing is I'm essentially creating, and I have created various ways for me to be able to meet with people. So the first team that you'll see is that I've got my fifth grade science, right? So I'm going back to my roots, fifth grade science. That's the first team that I created. That's where you would be able to meet with your students to talk a little bit about fifth grade science. You'll also notice that we've got art club over here off to the side. I never personally ran art club, but I was really tight with all of our art teachers. And I love just having that club persona because as educators, then you can push in, see what people need for support or request, and then you can help out. We also have our teams for faculty and staff. So if you want to really connect with other faculty and staff members, you can. This was a webinar that I did not too long ago. So shout out to IDEA Illinois. They are a fantastic organization, but I created a team, just kind of like a mock team. That way I can show them what teams look like. And then I always like to have a tab for support. So if there's anybody that needs help, faculty, staff member, whatever, I like to have a support tab. That way people can ask questions. If you are not familiar with Microsoft Teams and how it might differ from other LMSs like Google, right? Like Google Classroom, like Edmodo, like all those other things. It's quite frankly similar in the way that it's set up, just a little bit different in the interface. And I'll walk you through what that looks like. So we have general activity over here. These are different mentions and replies. Again, similar to like your Edmodo, your Google Classroom, things like that. We've got the chat feature, which I absolutely love. So love the chat feature, lots of fun there, and just intimate ways for you to have chat with other folks. We also have our teams, which I just showed y'all. These are the various teams that we have. We have the assignments, which I'll be working out of primarily today. That way y'all do have them and you see them. You can also see various assignments, the mock assignments that I've created when I've done other webinars. And again, it's fairly simple to create a webinar assignment or assignment period. We've got the calendar. So if there's anything that comes up meeting wise, like parent teacher conferences, things like that, then you totally can. You'll notice that a lot of my stuff is actually on my personal team. So I don't have any calendar notifications right now, but if I wanted to, I could forward them. Then I've got my various calls. So if I did call anybody, it would show up right here. Got my files, so you'll notice that I've got various files that I've also dropped here from previous webinars and activities I've done with educators. And then the apps that are down here are things that you can actually add in. And then we have some more apps that are down here. So actually, the first school that I worked at when I first started doing a lot of this, we were actually on a different learning management system, but I did find pretty quickly that we had 3 different licenses. We had like Microsoft, Google, and we had another one. I believe it was Apple Education. And we were like, okay, why are we spending money for 3 different licenses? Let's survey the teachers and figure out what we want. And we ended up wanting Microsoft, which is pretty cool. All righty, we're going to go ahead and let's take a look at reading progress. Going to go ahead and take a look first at 5th grade science. So what I'm going to do is join that team. Before I do, if you're new to Teams, and again, you can create an account. And what we're going to do is go to join or create team. When we do that, we can create a team up here off to the left, or we can join a team with a code. I don't have a code for y'all right now. I'm just going to go off of the team that I already have. But you'll notice I'm part of various teams here, like test teams and the stadium teams and Office 365 teams, all the teams. So if you wanted to, you could create a team, but I already have one created for us. This is 5th grade science, and I'm going to select it. When I select that team, you'll notice that I've got some assignments that I've already created. And what I'm going to do to kind of get that reading progress in there is I need to make an assignment. And what I'm going to do is go to assignments, and I'm going to make one. Before I do that, the home page has all the things that I've done, right? So we did a water cycle activity. We did a quiz. We did Arthur Needs New Glasses. I love Arthur, the books and the TV show, like the little aardvark. Love him. So we did an activity with that. We also did How Did You Feel About the Last Assignment? I mean, just great, great, great things in Teams. And before I even get to assignments, if you wanted to do a conversation, all you'd again have to do is type. I'll say hello, everyone. And there you go. pushes it out to everybody, similar to another learning management system. What I'm interested in doing is having reading progress. So I told y'all we need to go to assignments. I'm going to go to assignments right now. And you'll notice all of the things that I have assigned. So I've got water cycle quiz, if you give a pig a pancake, and Arthur needs new glasses. What I'm going to do right now is create something new, because that's how we get to reading progress. So we can do an assignment, we can do a quiz, or we can do from an existing document. Like if I have like a form or like a PDF or anything like that. But what I'm going to do is just do a brand new assignment. So I'm going to select assignment. And you'll notice, because I'm in incognito mode, if you couldn't tell. So right now, like you can't, like my computer doesn't recognize that I'm on my browser because I'm in dark mode. So for try reading progress, you'll notice that it comes up, and that's exactly what we're going to do. So I'm going to press got it. And what I'm going to do is add my title, because remember, you can't make it until you title it. So I think what I'm going to select for the assignment is I'm going to say, let's say buttermilk pancakes recipe. STEM cooking. So the reason why I say this is because when I was in the classroom, and then before I became an instructional coach, which is of course before I joined Microsoft, I taught a STEM cooking class for grades K through 6. And if you know anything about kids K through 6, they have very different abilities. What you want a 6-year-old to do is different from what you want a 6th grader to do. So what we did was we did a lot of cooking and reading comprehension and just seeing what we can do to make the art of the possible with cooking. That couldn't happen if I didn't have students that understood what the recipe was saying. So this was instrumental. What we can also do is we can add instructions. So what I'm going to say is, please read this recipe and go to your cooking groups to begin once you have read the recipe. Let Mrs. Thompson know if you have any questions. Cool. You'll also notice that up top, we can add a category that's like a tag. I don't have any tags, but what I can add is just like the cooking tag, and I can do that. And there we go. That's my tag. So for the instructions, you can see that we have the, excuse me, the instructions here. I can attach PDFs or anything like that. Right now, I'm not going to, because this is just a demo. What we'll also see is that we can have points. So I'll do this just out of 100 to make it simple. But something also really neat with Teams is that you can add a rubric from scratch, or you can upload a rubric, right? So if you want to add one right now, you could. And I just want to show you all what that looks like. Just personally, I like to do my rubrics on a scale of 1 to 4, 1 being poor, 4 being excellent. And you can add as many descriptions as you want, which you'll see over here. Excellent all the way to poor. And then you can also enter various descriptions. You can add like various rows. You can copy them, da, 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 da. Really, really neat. I don't have to attach anything document wise, but what I am going to do is take a look, and you'll see that I've got my OneDrive notebook. I can link it. I can add make code for coding, Teams. What I'm interested in is reading progress. When I select reading progress, here's where I am. What I can do, and you'll notice I'm in the like incognito mode, so it's not like picking me up because it doesn't recognize me. But that's actually really good, and that's the reason why I decided to do this, because I wanted for y'all to see what it looks like. So it's basically welcoming us to reading progress. What's happening is they're recording their reading aloud. You can provide more feedback. You can have more time for teaching. Lots of cool stuff here. When I press get started, essentially what happens is it's going to ask us for 2 different things. We're either going to import from the Word or the PDF, or we can browse that sample library. I don't have anything readily available for Word or PDF that matches this. However, I'm going to go ahead and show you what it looks like from my perspective. And what I'm going to do is say upload from this device. And I'm not sure if you can totally see what's going on right now, but what I'm doing is taking a look at our downloads. And I'm going to my lines, angles, and angle relationships project that I actually did with 7th grade students. And it looks like it's popping up right now, which is amazing. So hopefully y'all can see this, and I think that you can now that it's all switched over. And this was an activity that I did in middle and high school with students just to kind of, again, invigorate literacy with STEM. That's what this is all about. So we did an activity where we picked a building or landmark in the area, nationally or internationally, and essentially did either in-person or virtual shape walks. We wanted to see what it was going to be like to have those perpendicular lines, parallel lines, complementary, supplementary, a little bit of everything. Because when you bring math and STEM to life in a way with literacy for students, then it's not just them reading from like a textbook or anything, they're really into it. So what we would do here is we put it into reading progress. You'll notice it's got all the directions that are here. I wanted for them to put things in Word, PowerPoint, Sway, or Buncee. If you've never heard of Buncee, highly recommend that y'all check it out. I wanted for them to do a summary on how they arrived to noticing the different types of relationships, lines, and angles. And then on top of that, I wanted for them to just really think critically about it. I did have a rubric here. So here's the one little piece of caution that I'll give. Although I love importing PDFs, you'll notice that my rubric didn't exactly show up as it is. So what I will normally do in reading progress is I'll just duplicate the rubric. That way kids know what it is. Pretty simple fix. And you'll see that I've got the words up here, and it's also got the language that I put it in, because I am fluent in only one language, which is English. I do know some more of other languages to get by, but not nearly enough to put it in a different language for my students. All right, right now you'll notice that I'm also in student view. So if I'm in student view, here's what it's going to be looking like. And basically they can kind of go through that pathway of figuring out what the process is going to be like in order to do that project, which I really, really appreciate. You'll notice that I can't access my camera or microphone right now because right now I am talking to you. But if they were to start this project, essentially what would happen is they would read this out loud and then it would give the feedback back. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to go ahead and reattach import Word or PDF. And again, I know it says buttermilk pancakes, but we're doing a lot of things here. And I'm going to go right here for lines, angles, and angle relationships. And I just want to show y'all a couple other different things because this is cool. So I can also edit this in here. I did mention that my rubric does look a little different within this interface. I am more than welcome to edit it in here myself. I do find it a little bit easier to do the editing with the rubric directly there. But what I can do is I can go ahead and edit. That way it's in that space. Over to the left-hand side, or right-hand side rather, is everything I talked about earlier. So for reading level, I might say, let's say 3rd grade. For genre, you can choose fiction or nonfiction. This is nonfiction because we're doing a project. For the number of attempts, right now I've got unlimited. That is kind of the default there. Like I mentioned earlier, I will do 4 to 5. So let's do 4. However, you can do up to 10 or unlimited, as little as 1, entirely up to you. We've got our time limit. Now, this is the big one because I do have educators I work with where they do want time limits on things just to kind of see how students are progressing. In STEM, it is kind of your call, right? Because we don't really do running records like how ELA or humanity teachers might. I will typically do no limit, but if I do have a limit, I will put it up to 5. But again, up to you. Then we have our pronunciation sensitivity for less sensitive, more sensitive, or default, which is just kind of neutral. I will usually leave it at default. I'm going to keep Reading Coach off because, again, that's the next webinar that I'm going to be doing. And then I know video can kind of be a little bit of a sticky wicket because you might not have students that are comfortable putting on their video or whatnot. But what I'll do right now is just not require the video. And the reason why I'm saying that is because what came up beforehand, where I'm talking to you right now on video, so the video won't be there for the student view, I'm going to turn it off just for brevity's sake. But you can see what's here. Something else that's also really interesting is that you can do this in various languages for reading progress. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do French. The reason why I say this is because my mother is fluent in French. I think I brought this up a couple times. For some reason, she believes I'm fluent in French and I'm not. But what's going to happen for reading progress is it'll pick that up. So let's go ahead and do next. So you'll see reading passage is currently being edited. Press the check mark before moving on to any changes. because then otherwise they'll be lost. I'm going to press that mark down here. So there's a check mark down here just to make sure that it got caught up. I'm going to go ahead and do that translation right here. And you'll notice that French is going to be what it takes it in, which is pretty cool. So I see it in my language right now because this is the language that I speak. Student view, though, if we were to take a look, right, you'll notice that things are getting a little bit different. So like my camera's coming up. So I'm previewing the student experience. All right, gonna go back one more time. Gonna go to reading progress. Import that document one more time. That way I can show you what it looks like when it gets posted. There we go. Open. All right, gonna go ahead and keep it English for this time. I'm gonna turn off Reading Coach. I'm gonna turn off the video. I'm gonna keep the reading level 3rd grade. For genre, we're gonna say nonfiction. I'm gonna go ahead and say 4 attempts, no time limit, and next. So here's what happens. It does take a second or two. All right, so once it gets there, we've got this already embedded into the system with reading progress. Okay, so reading progress is already here. And again, all those times of doing those running records, taking them back to the back in the room, those times are gone. The kids can actually do this just like how I'm doing this right now in Cannon Beach. They can do this with headphones. They can sit at their desks, or they can go out to the hallway, or they can work with their specialist, and they can do this, which is amazing. Like I mentioned, we can add the rubrics that are here. We can assign to various groups and teams. We can have the due date, the time due, again, similar to like Google Classroom, Edmodo, all the other learning management systems, Canvas, for example. And then on top of that, you can add various settings. So when I have the reading progress assigned, I've showed you a couple of times what it looks like to actually get into that product, right? To get in and see how reading progress works. It automatically will open for them, and then they can practice, and then the feedback will be sent directly to you. You can assign it again to various classes. So right now I've just got it to 5th grade science to all of my students. But if you wanted to assign it to only a couple of students at a time, you could. So let's say that you might have a couple of students that are struggling with reading progress. Irony, right? So maybe like they're like 4th grade reading at a 3rd grade level, and you want them to get from point A to point B. You can assign activities to certain students at a certain time. There's also various due dates that you can put this on. So you can do this either during the school day, which I've worked with many educators that do, and like this is part of their like day-to-day, or if there's something you want to assign a student at home, then you're able to make that work. So you can assign various due dates and times. On top of that too, you can figure out whether or not you want this to be added to students' calendars. I will usually say no, and only because if I'm assigning an assignment directly to a student, it will just go directly to them. However, there are these options. I've got educators that love doing students only, students and me, and students and team owners, a little bit of everything. On top of that too, you can post the assignment to the general channel. You can also personally, as the educator, receive notifications for late turn-ins, which I love. I don't like knowing when something isn't turned in because I just want to know if the kids are okay. So receiving notifications for late turn-ins is phenomenal. And then if any of you are ELA educators, or maybe if you're interested in that turn-it-in aspect, the documents for the assignment could potentially sync to turn it in. So you can go ahead and have that turned on depending on your license. So that's reading progress. And really, when I think about how this works for students, I mean, I can say a lot of stuff, but I think it's better if we've got students that actually are able to share it. So if you can give me just a second so I can bring this up. I'm going to go ahead and do that screen share one more time. And what's neat about reading progress is when it was first introduced, we were doing a lot of trying to figure out, okay, how is this going to positively impact students, schools, and beyond? And so far, of course, it's just been so overwhelmingly positive with how students are working. And I will also drop this link into the chat box for folks who are interested, reading progress. Just if you want to find out a little bit more information. And here we go. And actually, I don't know if you can hear me like this, so. My default speakers have changed. I'm taking out my headphones and I'll start again.
We can hear you.
Okay, cool.
Literacy is so important, and it's my job to help the kids grow in that and to see the value in that and to break the mindsets of like, oh, I'm just a bad reader, I don't like to read.
I don't have to worry about other people just looking at me and staring at me. It's just reading to myself, sort of, but on camera.
When I came across Reading Progress, I was able to say, hey, I've assigned a passage to each and every one of you guys. At your reading level, I want you to record you reading this passage. I was surprised that when the whole class came back, literally within 10 minutes, everyone was already done. Having that recording, I'm able to spend ample amount of time to analyze. And instead of using my instructional time, it allows me to use my planning time to figure out how do I intentionally approach every student? The whole class, this is what I'll teach them. And maybe this one specific individual student, I need to address with him or her this specific area. Reading Progress has really motivated a lot of kids to work harder and kind of gave them ownership of their learning.
Well, as a mother and an educator, you know that the conference with the student is the most powerful piece. It's not necessarily them reading and recording. It's what you do with that reading and with that recording. And she's able to capitalize on that even faster now.
It probably helps me be a better reader because I can actually listen to myself. And if I did say a word wrong or something, I'd be able to say it better than next time because I know that I said it wrong.
Struggling readers, they struggle, so they avoid reading. And by avoiding reading, they struggle even more. And so it's been really cool to watch how my kids are, reading more at home. They're more excited to read in the classroom. They have their personal goals that they've made, not me. And so they're excited to work.
Coming from an administrative perspective is that this isn't just a classroom tool. Because we have so much access to data, that this is a powerful tool to change the learning trajectory of a building. But watching her grow in her reading, it's been a joy for me. I used to love reading as a child, and I wanted that for her.
Now that we use the app, I'm more confident. I'm less worried about it. Get worried about a lot of things, but reading now is one of the things that I'm not worried about anymore.
I want all of my students to get to the point where they know what it feels like to get lost in a book.
Favorite part is when I get to a really interesting part in the book and then I can't stop reading it, and it's really fun.
All right, so what I'm going to do is put my headphones back in. And it's changed to the next one. Just double checking to make sure that y'all can hear me.
Yes, we can.
Yeah, awesome. All right. So again, I just wanted to highlight just not only that power of literacy, and I'll go ahead and put my contact information up here one more time before we switch to questions. But it's so crucial to not only have the tools to be able to facilitate it, but also have students be in charge of their own learning. And I think when it comes to literacy, for me, that's honestly what it's all about. We can teach students how to be literate, but we can't help to facilitate that throughout the rest of their lives without a little bit of that gradual release of responsibility. Because that, quite frankly, is sometimes how we have students that come to us in middle and high school where they might not be literate. There are tools and processes and avenues in place that we can give students the opportunity to be able to be literate. And that's why I love Reading Progress. That's why I wish I had Reading Progress when I was teaching elementary school. And that's why when I work with educators now, they just are so appreciative of this tool. And again, when it goes back to STEM, there are ways to, again, put that literacy into the classroom. We can do this with math challenges. We can do this with lab reports. We can do this with passages from the textbook. Literacy is everybody's responsibility. We can absolutely make it work and give feedback to students. Oops. There we go. We can absolutely make it work and give feedback to students in a way that not only makes sense for them, but also saves us time and makes sense for us. So here's my contact information off to the right-hand side. Again, I am on Twitter at Victoria the Tech, which is where you can find me and where I'm the most active on social. Again, I'm very friendly, so please feel free to reach out. And then that is my Microsoft email right there. It is vithompson@microsoft.com, which is where you can find me if you would like to email me, ask me any questions, or if you'd like any resources.